All right, let's get right into one of the most pivotal and, frankly, confusing moments in modern history, the Tet Offensive. This is a wild story about how a battle can be won on the ground but completely lost in the court of public opinion, and how that one event changed the course of a war. But here's the thing. To really wrap your head around Tet, you first have to understand what the Vietnam War was. It wasn't like World War II. As this quote gets at, it was this messy, brutal conflict with no clear battle lines and no simple objective. It was just incredibly confusing for everyone, especially for the folks back home.
And that leads us to the big question, the central mystery of the whole thing. From a purely military standpoint, the Tet Offensive was a complete failure for the side that launched it. So how on earth did it become the turning point against the United States? That's the paradox we're going to unpack.
So, how did this all kick off? Well, it started with a complete and total shock. On a day that was supposed to be a day of peace and celebration, the war suddenly erupted everywhere. What made this so unbelievably shocking was the timing. January 30th, 1968 was the beginning of Tet, the Vietnamese New Year. A truce was supposed to be in effect, but instead, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces launched this massive, perfectly coordinated attack on over 100 cities all at the same time. The sheer scale and boldness of it just caught everyone completely flat-footed. Now, what's really wild is when you contrast this chaos with the general mood just weeks before the attack. To really feel the shock, you have to first understand the confidence. Think about this number for a second. By the end of 1967, the U.S. had 500,000 troops in Vietnam. That is a massive, massive military presence. And with that kind of power came a real sense that progress was being made. And back home, the message from the top, from generals, from politicians, was crystal clear. We're winning. They kept talking about seeing light at the end of the tunnel. The official line was that the enemy was on the ropes and victory was just a matter of time. And this wasn't just spin coming from Washington. A lot of the soldiers on the ground actually felt the same way. In any given firefight, in any specific battle, they were winning. I mean, listen to this veteran's perspective. From where he stood, they never lost. They were always successful. That was the reality, or so it seemed. And here's the thing. When you look at the raw military data from the Tet Offensive, that feeling of success was proven to be absolutely right. Just look at this. The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong had this whole list of strategic goals. They thought they'd spark a popular uprising against the South. Nope, didn't happen. They hoped to force the U.S. to just pack up and leave. Not a chance. Topple the government in Saigon? The government stood firm. In fact, they failed to hold on to a single one of their targets. Militarily, it was a catastrophe for them. And make no mistake, the fighting was absolutely ferocious. This was a head-on collision of iconic Cold War tech. On one side, you had the American M16 and the legendary Huey helicopter, which basically defined that war. And on the other, the super reliable AK-47 and the powerful RPG-7 rocket launcher. It was a brutal, ugly fight. So, if it was such a clear victory on the battlefield, how did it all fall apart? Well, the answer wasn't in the jungles of Vietnam. It was thousands of miles away, in American living rooms. And this is really the heart of it. You had two different wars happening at the exact same time. There was the war of statistics, of body counts and military objectives, and by those metrics, the Allies won. But then, there was the war that people were seeing on their TV screens every single night. For the first time ever, raw, bloody combat was being beamed directly into people's homes. And the images of chaos, of fighting in the cities, of the U.S. Embassy itself being attacked, it just shattered that official story of progress. What's so amazing is that even internally, the government didn't seem to grasp what was happening. Check out this quote from a declassified CIA report from just 2 weeks into the attack. They thought the South Vietnamese people being angry at the Viet Cong was a PR win. But that complex reality, that nuance, was completely drowned out by the shocking images the world was seeing. And this whole situation just ripped open what people started calling the credibility gap. It was this feeling, this growing suspicion that what the government was telling you and what you were seeing with your own two eyes were completely different things. After Tet, that gap wasn't a gap anymore. It was a canyon. From there, the political dominoes just started to fall, and fast. Tet became the point of no return for public opinion on the war. The effects were just seismic. Public support for the war didn't just dip, it plummeted.
The famous TV anchor Walter Cronkite went on air and called the war a stalemate, and that was a huge moment. The whole idea that America was on this inevitable path to victory, gone. It was really the beginning of the end for U.S. involvement.
So it all comes back to this incredible contradiction. The Tet Offensive was a massive, clear-cut military victory for the U.S. and its allies, but it turned into an absolute, unmitigated political and psychological defeat. And that leaves us with a question that, honestly, is maybe even more relevant today. Tet was one of the first major conflicts to prove that wars aren't just fought with guns and bombs. They're fought with images, with narratives, and with perception. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Where is the real battlefield now?